Italy, September 1943. A nation doesn't fall in a single moment. It fractures. As World War II tears through Europe, Italy subtly turns on its former ally, signing an armistice with the Allies after years of standing beside Nazi Germany. What follows is not peace, but invasion. German troops flood into central and northern Italy, seizing cities, disarming Italian soldiers, and restoring control through fear and violence. This is where Sinister Empires begins its story, at the moment when loyalty collapses and survival becomes a crime. For years under Benito Mussolini's fascist rule, Italy had tied its fate to Hitler's Germany, dreaming of reviving the glory of ancient Rome. Italian forces marched alongside German armies across North Africa, the Balkans, and even the frozen Eastern Front. But ambition quickly turned to disaster. Poor equipment, weak leadership, and crushing defeats left soldiers starving, freezing, and dying far from home. Inside Italy, civilians endured bombings, food shortages, and the growing realization that the war was being lost, and that Germany was no longer a partner, but a burden. By the summer of 1943, the illusion finally shattered. After Allied troops landed in Sicily, Mussolini was removed from power on July 25th by order of King Victor Emmanuel III and placed under arrest. A new government under Marshal Pietro Badoglio quietly searched for a way out. In September, Italy signed an armistice with the Allies. But instead of liberation, chaos followed. Nazi Germany launched Operation Axe, a swift and merciless takeover. Italian units were disarmed, thousands of soldiers captured, and Rome fell under German occupation. Mussolini himself was rescued by German commandos and installed as the figurehead of the Italian Social Republic in the north, a puppet state kept alive only by German guns. Southern Italy slipped into Allied hands, but Rome remained trapped. Its people lived between hunger and terror as the German army and SS imposed brutal rule. Prisons filled. Interrogations turned into torture. Jewish families were hunted down, and political opponents vanished without a trace. Out of this darkness, resistance grew. Former soldiers, communists, and ordinary civilians became partisans, striking back with sabotage and assassinations. The German response was merciless, collective punishment, executions, and threats against entire communities. Then, on the afternoon of March 23, 1944, a bomb exploded on Via Rasella in the heart of Rome. 33 German soldiers were killed. Within hours, Nazi commanders decided that blood would answer blood. What followed inside the Ardeatine caves would become one of the most chilling massacres in occupied Europe, and a crime the world would not forget. When one of the wounded German policemen later died, the number marked for death rose again. Herbert Kappler was given the task of making it happen. He pulled names from prison lists with cold efficiency: Jews awaiting deportation, political prisoners, resistance fighters, and men who had simply been arrested at random. Some had been held for months, others only days. Many had never been charged at all. They were teachers and laborers, lawyers and officers, artists and priests, fathers, sons, brothers. In some cases, entire families would later learn that more than one of their own had been taken. On March 24, 1944, trucks carried the prisoners to the Ardeatine caves outside Rome. Their hands were tied with rope to keep them compliant. Inside the dark tunnels, they were pushed forward in groups of 5 and ordered to kneel. Shots were fired into the back of their heads. SS officers Erich Priebke and Karl Theodosius crossed names off their lists as the executions continued. Kappler himself took part. As the bodies piled up, the next victims were forced to kneel on top of the dead. The killing went on for hours. Those waiting outside could hear the gunfire echoing from within the caves. When it was finally over, explosives were detonated to seal the entrances. Some victims may still have been alive when a rock collapsed over them. The massacre was announced only the next day. A German communique claimed the dead were criminals and communists, insisting the executions were lawful. It made no mention of Jewish hostages, innocent civilians, or the secret nature of the killings. Across Rome, Families searched prisons and hospitals, desperate for answers. They found only silence. If you're finding this history important to remember, take a moment to subscribe to Sinister Empires and tell us in the comments, what city or country are you watching from? After Rome was liberated on June 4th, 1944, the seal caves were opened and the truth could no longer be hidden. Beneath the collapsed stone lay bodies, stacked exactly as they had fallen. The air was thick, the tunnels narrow, and recovery was slow and agonizing. Many victims were still bound with rope. Some were barely recognizable. Personal items, rings, papers, scraps of clothing, were gathered so families might identify the dead. In the years that followed, 326 of the 335 victims were named. 75 were Jewish. The youngest was 15 years old. The oldest was 74. The Ardeatine Massacre became a permanent scar on Italy's memory. After the war, justice reached some of those responsible. Rome's fascist police chief, Pietro Caruso, was tried, sentenced to death, and executed in September 1944. Alfred Jodl, who confirmed the reprisal order, was condemned at Nuremberg and hanged in 1946 for crimes deemed criminal, not military. Albert Kessering was sentenced to death, later released. Others saw their sentences reduced or died in prison. Herbert Kappler received life imprisonment but escaped decades later, dying shortly after in Germany. Erich Priebke lived freely for half a century before extradition, trial, and a life sentence. If this story mattered to you, share it so others don't forget. And let us know in the comments what dark chapter of history you want Sinister Empires to uncover next. He died in 2013. Karl Haas, another SS officer involved in the massacre, was also sentenced to life imprisonment in 1998. But after the trials ended and the sentences were handed down, what truly remained was memory. The Ardeatine caves themselves never spoke, yet they endured. Stone, earth, and darkness preserved the trace of what had happened there, long after gunfire faded. In the years following the war, the caves were transformed into a memorial. Each name carved into stone reclaimed a life that had been meant to vanish without record. What was intended to terrorize Rome into silence instead became one of the clearest testimonies of occupation and Nazi brutality in Italy. Long after uniforms disappeared and commands lost their power, the caves continued to confront visitors with the price of violence, obedience, and indifference. The dead could not be brought back, but they were no longer hidden. Their presence endures as a warning and as a demand that what happened in Rome on March 24th, 1944, is never denied, softened, or forgotten. Thank you for watching Sinister Empires. If this story moved you, share it so others can remember too. And in the comments, tell us what dark chapter of history you want us to uncover next.